Hello and welcome. This is NTA Tuesday Live, and I'm Cyril Stober. Now, the impact of agricultural recovery and economic diversification policies under the Tinubu government emphasizes the significance of striking a balance between social, economic, and environmental goals to attain sustainable growth. Now, the Nigerian economy under this administration has undergone one of the most ambitious resets in recent years, from fuel subsidy removal to exchange rate reforms and emergency on food security. The government says, though these choices are necessary to stabilize the economy and secure the future, laying the foundation for a long-term economic stability and food security. Now, from the price of garri to the cost of rice and tomatoes, the economy is felt most at the market and homes. And as Nigerians tighten their belts, many are asking, when will these reforms translate into real relief? Tonight, NTA Tuesday Live will discuss the Nigerian economy in 2025. What has changed so far, and what challenges remain, and what Nigerians should realistically expect in 2026. But before we get down to the discussion, let's get to see this report put together by correspondent Musa Baba Aliyu.
The 365 days of 2025 have been a year full of economic activities impacting on the social and financial well-being of the country. The President Bola Tinubu's administration has recorded notable economic progress in 2025, driven by reforms initiated since 2023. These include the removal of fuel subsidies, unification of foreign exchange rates, and measures to enhance non-oil revenue collection. While inflation and living costs continue to pose challenges, key indicators point to improved macroeconomic stability, according to data from the National Bureau of Statistics and Central Bank of Nigeria. These gains reflect successful diversification away from heavy reliance on crude oil, while the non-oil sector contributing over 96% of GDP in the third quarter of the year. Non-oil revenue surged dramatically, reaching 20.59 trillion naira from January to August 2025, a 40.5% increase over the same period in 2024, and achieving the full-year target ahead of schedule. Nigeria maintained constant trade surplus, shifting towards net exporter status. Total trade in the third quarter reached 38.9 trillion naira, with a surplus of 6.69 trillion naira. Non-oil exports gained ground, signaling progress in economic diversification. Inflation eased progressively, reaching a 3-year low of 20.12% in August 2025, with further moderation reported later in the year. Fuel prices saw reductions linked to operations at the Dangote refinery, while the tax-to-GDP ratio improved. These achievements were prominently highlighted in President Tinubu's address during the presentation of 2026 budget.
We will build trust by matching our words with results and our allocations with outcomes. The most significant budget is not the one we announce, it is the one we deliver.
However, experts note that while macroeconomic indicators have strengthened, the pace for relief for ordinary citizens remains a concern amid ongoing cost of living pressures. Sustaining these gains into 2026 and beyond will depend on continued implementation and addressing structural challenges.
All right, that report sets the tone for tonight's discussion. Let's get to meet our guests. Welcome to this program, Professor Ken Ife, development economist and global consultant. Thanks for being here,
Thank
Prof.
you for having me.
Also in the studio here with us is Mr. Kevin Emmanuel, who's an economist. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Well, joining us via Zoom is Dr. Muda Yusuf, who is CEO, Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprises. He joins us from Lagos via Zoom. Dr. Muda Yusuf, thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much. Good evening, and good evening to my friends, Prof. and Kevin.
Okay.
Well done. Good evening.
And also joining us is Professor Mohammed Mutaka. He's a professor of economics. He joins us also via Zoom from Kaduna. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Thanks, Paul.
All right, we'll get to that as we go on. And so, welcome to NTA Tuesday Live. Today it's all about the Nigerian economy in 2025 and what has changed, as we did ask in our opening comments. What has changed? And yes, there were so many reforms which, bitter as many Nigerians would say those pills were, the government says they are necessary to build a strong economy. So we'll start off by looking at just how well the economy is picking up and how better Nigerians are from the early days and from a few years back. And it's all coming under the renewed hope agenda, which promised economic relief. But Prof, how would you assess that?
Two ways to look at it. One is to look at the macroeconomic indices. The other one is to look at sectoral performances, to see what does that actually mean on sector by sector. But the first thing that hits you is, what did the president say on the day he was sworn in? He says he wants to collapse the exchange rates. And I think he has succeeded in doing that. And actually much more than we bargained for, because not only that is steady, but it's also less volatile in the sense that nothing hurts the economy more than imported inflation, because it runs on the back of an import-dependent economy. So we know that is where we have to join forces. But of course, there are other areas. He said subsidy is gone. Subsidy gone. He only got 50% of it, according to World Bank. But then it opened the door for more things to happen. And while we were all struggling, Dangote entered the picture and made dramatic change in our fortunes in that regard. So we have lots of stuff to celebrate on those two areas. Then we'll come to sectors, then you can see what sector performance. You mentioned agriculture a few times. The report talks about agriculture. I have to tell you this. In January, I was mad about agricultural performance because the first quarter was 0.07%. And it was literally zero. And I was saying, what was going on? But second one, it picked up. Now, the third one is above population growth rate, which is good. And then, quite dramatically, agriculture actually leads in the inflation drop. It's actually 10%, down from 37 down to 10. It's massive drop.
Right.
And there are many reasons why that has happened.
Okay.
We'll look at
so
those.
many reasons. We'll look at them, and still, in spite of this drop you talked about, Nigerians are still looking out for a single digit.
It's inevitable.
All right. Okay. Well, Kevin Iman.
Thank you so much. It's always a privilege to be here. Compliments of the season to you.
It's your say.
When the president took over in his opening inaugural speech, he said that subsidy is gone. Subsidy on not just petrol, subsidy on FX, because when he took over, Nigeria was spending about $330 million per month subsidizing the FX markets. You had multiple exchange rates. You had black market premium over 30%, and Nigeria was spending about 7 trillion a year on under recovery for petroleum subsidy. And I'll tell you about 47% of that, those subsidy claims were questionable. Because you couldn't match bridging allowances in terms of the levies paid to the bridging claims actually tendered at the mid and downstream regulator. So, to the credit of Mr. President, I'll tell you that the CBN was technically insolvent when it took over in 2023. The government had no money to pay subsidy, had no money to subsidize FX. In 2025, the FX markets is able to provide its own liquidity without the central bank intervening in the markets. And that is the credit of the central bank in terms of the policy reforms that it has implemented to ensure that this is possible. However, not all the revenues that comes to FAC is reported to FAC. I would say anywhere between 28 and 32% of the revenue that comes to FAC is not reported to FAC today. And that brings serious question about integrity and accountability and oversight of the National Assembly. There are powers of appropriation, the fact that the executive cannot spend any money not appropriated by the National Assembly. I also think that this is the government that has had the most fiscal recklessness I've seen in the history of Nigeria. Revenues have increased because of valuation in FX and the impact that has had on revenues that comes to the government. At the same time, the revenues has not been managed properly. And then on the issue about inflation, I don't believe the numbers. And the reason why I don't believe the CPI numbers that are released by the MBS is because the inflation to interest yield curve, usually it follows, right? The Monetary Policy Committee will adjust the MPR if they believe that CPI is trending at around 15%. 15 to 27% variance, it's just not normal, it's abnormal.
And they haven't done that so far.
And they haven't done that. They did only one cut of 50 basis points, or 0.5% from 27.5 to 27%. Look, the inflation numbers that the MBS is banding around does not reflect the realities on the ground.
Okay, we'll look at that in greater detail. But let's go over to Dr. Muda Yusuf in Lagos and put the same question to you, Dr. Muda Yusuf. How would you assess this economy or Nigeria's position in 2025?
Well, again, thank you for having me, and compliments of the season to all Nigerians. I think one way to look at all of this is where the economy would have been without these reforms. Because it is very easy to say that the reform has brought pains, it has inflicted hardship. But what would have happened if those reforms had not taken place? And it is in that context we will appreciate more the value that the reforms have brought to this economy. Because before the inception of those reforms, the economy was on the verge of complete collapse. It may not be evident to many people, but that was where the economy was heading. For those of us in the private sector, I remember in 2023 first half, we got to a situation where the letters of credit that were opened by the private sector for purposes of import transactions were no longer being honored by correspondent banks abroad, because there was no forex liquidity to support those transactions. It was that bad, and that showed the level of the credibility shortcoming that the economy suffered. And you also know that until recently, for many years, you couldn't go with Nigerian Naira card, debit card, and do any transaction outside the country. That's a reflection of how bad the confidence level was. And from the fiscal position, we were almost completely insolvent, because we are driving the economy with a lot of money that have been printed, sometimes not even fully disclosed. I'm saying this for us to appreciate the fact that the intervention that came as a result of the reform has saved the economy from a major calamity. Because if we had gone through that route and nothing changed, we'd be talking about maybe exchange rate of maybe $1 to 5,000, something similar to what happened in Zimbabwe or in Venezuela. So that context is very important. The second point I like to make is that, yes, the first 2 years has been very, very challenging because of the shocks of the reforms. And from your intro and from the initial comments, we all know that it was very painful. The shock that came from the exchange rate unification, the shock that came from fuel subsidy removal. And the president said it repeatedly in many of his speeches, that if there were other easier ways of fixing the economy, he would have adopted those ways. But there were no other choices than to take those corrective measures. It was like taking a surgery in order to save a patient. And the process of surgery is not always the best for any patient. But the good news is that those shocks are beginning to fizzle out. Things are getting better. I mean, for everybody, whether the citizens or businesses, we cannot compare the situation in 2025 with the situation in 2024 or with the situation in the second half of 2023. There is clearly an improvement. So a lot of progress has been made. The economy is beginning to turn the corner. We are beginning to see significant stability. We are beginning to see some deceleration in inflation, even though my friend said he doesn't believe the figures. But the reality is that we are beginning to see some moderation in prices, especially on the back of the fact that we are seeing some stability in the foreign exchange market. Because the foreign exchange, the exchange rate is a major component, is a major driver of inflation. So when the exchange rate begins to moderate, naturally there's a pass-through effect on prices. So some progress has been made. 2025 is clearly better than what we had before. I agree with you, there's still a lot more work to do, especially from the point of view of the cost of living issues, on affordability issues, and so on.
All right, thank you so much. A number of the issues you've raised would be further interrogated as we go on. Time for us to get to Professor Mohammed Muntaka in Kaduna and seek his opening comments. The basic question is, are there any significant or remarkable changes in what used to be and what is now at the tail end of 2025?
Thank you for having me, and I think it's very good that we did these discussions within the tail end of the year. So as to, first of all, I need to correct, I'm not in Kaduna, I'm in Zaria, Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria to be precise. For economics to assess the economy within the 2 years, I think it's a mixed basket. There are some progress, there are some challenges, and still persisting. But to measure economic performance, there are indices to measure that performance. And one of it is the living standard of the citizens. If their living standards have improved in the last 2 years, then we can say, yes, there is improvement in the economy as it were. But in some extent, you said the level of employment, whether level of employment, people have job, one of other indices that need to be looked at as a way of measuring economic performance. But also, the most essential thing is the critical sector of the economy that's supposed to drive the economy. For instance, manufacturing. Is manufacturing improving or they are decelerating or whatever you can assess within that. And in terms of other indices like inflation, exchange rate, for inflation, yes, it's coming down, but this can be attributed to two main factors. One, you change the base year from 2009 to 2024, which means that you have changed the base year and you expand the base as well from 700 items to 900. So there must be a slowdown. The prices are still increasing, but increasing in slower rate. And therefore, we can't yet say it is Uhuru. In terms of the exchange rate, yes, there is stability. So what the stability brought forward? One, because the higher demands that you have in the foreign exchange market has doused much, and therefore the Naira rally round from certain figure. So these are the things that you can measure and said whether the economy has improved or not in terms of, one, to say, yes, these are reforms. And in terms of that reforms, what that reforms brought in terms of employment, in terms of job creations, and what have you. I'm sure in discussing those issues, I think people will look at those indices and compare with what we have in terms of, yes, there is fiscal recklessness before this government came in. And therefore, that fiscal recklessness leads to what we are seeing today, the squeezing out, the crowding out of the manufacturing sector in terms of productions, in terms of job creations, and also in terms of agricultural performance. Yes, Professor Ike said he's worried with the early performance. That coincides with the planting season. So after our planting season, the moment harvest season came, then agriculture taken up. So I think it's a mixed basket, and there is a win, there is loss, and there are much work to be done.
Thank you so much. Yes, we stand corrected. Join us from Zaria. Okay, thank you. Back here in the studio, Prof. Again, virtually all our discussants tonight have described it as a mixed bag. Win some, not big wins or not wins at all in some areas, but which are the key areas of focus that you think have made these changes to take place in the economic reforms as to achieve some level of growth?
Three key areas that are driving the entire scenario. One is what the central bank is doing. And because the central bank not only has sanitized actually cleared almost $8 billion debt. We're in serious debt. All the airlines were
FX swaps, FX forwards.
Yeah.
Nigeria was number 3.
They sorted that out. And then the airlines started coming back, the likes of Emirates and all of that. Then they are recapitalizing the banks, which is going to produce stronger banks. Even though maybe, I don't know, I think most of them have actually crossing through, coming through. Then also, our balance of payment has moved from negative to positive. The last year was like $6.8 billion, and then the balance of trade also moved from negative to positive, about 6.65 trillion naira. And this has implication for GDP. So don't forget, GDP has four stamps. You've got the household consumption over 70 to 80%, government consumption just under 10%. Then you have investment, which is private sector and what they do, and then you have balance of payments. These are the four constructs. So all of them are being affected. Even the tax reform coming in January is going to affect both this household and also the industrialism. So there is so much. Foreign exchange reserves gone up 46, just came down 44, 45 points. So all of the indices around the health of the financial system, and no one has ever doubted anything about the financial system stability because they have been stable. Their non-performing ratio 5%, and they're all doing under 5%, most of them. Capital adequacy ratio 15%, they are doing 10, 15 more, That hasn't been an area of serious concern. Then the other one is agriculture. I've just started talking about agriculture. See, the importance of agriculture, President declared state of emergency on agriculture. So what happened was that, one, we went into all year round farming, which is significant. And that's why I now doff my hat for this Minister for Agriculture. I work very closely with him, by the way. So he's got this all year farming right. Everybody's doing that now. And then this backyard thing, you use small bags to do small things at home, they're beginning to turn into miracle. We're doing that. We do thousands of hectares of cassava, and I'm not having to use empty bags, cement bags, for multiplying my cassava. I'm telling you, millions of bags. We are coming wherever there's water, whether it's well or riverside or borehole, wherever you see it or lake, put those small bags there. And then you are seeing miracle. They mature half the time, 6 months rather than 1 year. Then they do twice the volume rather than so. All of these are coming in. Then fintech is also with NIN, the distribution of inputs is becoming easier. So there's so many things that are happening, even microcredit with the NIN. So the minister has got that place turned around. That's why the growth rate has gone up, and that's why the food thing crashed.
Right, two things, okay.
But the third one, me and him will talk about that one, because that's the oil.
All right.
That has been sorted out.
All right. Before we get
we're going to get there, because that's the big thing on the thing.
Before we get there, you had just mentioned agriculture, but again, there's the feeling that yes, you would definitely see some improvement. Harvest season does come with an improvement in produce.
We're doing all year round farming.
Right.
All year round.
Right.
So we don't have any season, anything.
So if you, for instance, were to think of what has come in as a result of harvest, then it doesn't detract from what you're saying. That's one aspect. Then the other,
because we did what they call it, dry season farming.
Okay. The other,
no, wet season, dry season farming, and we're now on all year round.
Well, the other, of course, is the question that Professor Mutaka raised, and which many Nigerians have raised it. Has manufacturing really picked up?
That's another story.
Manufacturing has not picked up, because when you look at in the calculation for GDP, CIGM, consumer spending, investments, government spending, and then balance of trade, balance of payment. When you look at those indices, you see that most of the investment that has come into Nigeria are hot money, what they call foreign portfolio investments. And you could see the kickback when the government announced 30% CGT rates, capital gains tax rates. Most of those funds come into treasuries, comes into the stock markets. They are not patient capital. Patient capital stays for at least 5 years. They are not coming to build factories and build industries like Dangote is planning to expand his fertilizer production from 3 million to 9 million tons, or expand his refinery from 650,000 to 1.4 million barrels and add a second train. They are coming for portfolio investments. So manufacturing has not picked up because the inflation has kept the interest rates very high. Right? Interest rate is high, prime lending rate is high. There's been revaluation on fair value gains for interest rates, because after the Monetary Policy Committee announces their interest rate decision, 10 days after that decision, the banks are obligated to write to their customers. So existing loans and fresh loans is difficult for companies to borrow. Dr. Muda mentioned that in 2023, LCs were not even being honored. I remember I was on a trip in China last year, and my host told me that there's a company in Ogun State that has had a $2.2 million LC that has not been funded for 2 years. And they were planning to import some equipment into Nigeria to use for B2B manufacturing. That was the situation we're in. It's no longer the situation today because LCs have been honored, right? But the question is, are the credit conditions good for companies to be able to borrow money and do business? The answer is no. So the real sector of the economy has not seen improvements.
Dr. Muda Yusuf must be interested in the matter of manufacturing and what and how manufacturing has fared, particularly in 2025. Let's get to him and hear how he explains this.
Yes, thank you, Cyril. Before I address the issue of manufacturing, let me make this point. That economic development or transformation of the economy is not only the responsibility of the federal government. The state governments, the local governments have roles to play. And we must constantly underscore that. Because unless we do that, we keep coming up with the conclusion that there are gaps to be filled, the federal government is not doing enough and all of that. I mean, look at the impact of the reform on the revenue that has been accruing to the states. Look at the amount of... They were not able to do that before. These are some of the benefits of the reform that has taken place. And for many of them, I'm not saying all of, for many of them, they are really impacting on their states. I've seen instances where they invest in agriculture, they support their farmers with inputs, with tractors, all manner of empowerment, construction of projects and all of that. We may not be where we want to be. But the reform had a major impact at the level of the subnationals. And many of them have acknowledged it. I know of a particular state that was saying that they were awash with more funds than they were expecting. That's a state government. These things have significant developmental impact. Now you talked about manufacturing. You see, when it comes to the real sector of the economy, we are talking about agriculture, we are talking about manufacturing, maybe mining. These things are driven largely by structural factors. And the structural challenges in this economy are quite huge. And many of those structural challenges are legacy issues.
Dr. Muda.
I mean, take Kanji Dam, for instance.
Dr. Muda.
Are you hearing me?
Yeah, sure we are. Well, let him land.
Let me just land. Let me land.
Yes.
Let me land. Kanji Dam was built in 1968. Close to 60 years ago. That's a major hydro electricity generating plant. How much of transformation are taking place in Kanji Dam? And you need power to be able to drive industrialization. You cannot sort all these things out in 2 years, especially given where we are coming from. So I admit there are challenges with manufacturing, but most of those challenges are rooted in the structural deficiencies in the economy. And those structural deficiencies are not quick fixes. You can't fix them so easily. Some progress has been made. The government is trying to do a lot under the power initiative to transform the power sector. The federal government and the states are doing a lot on roads and all of that to build infrastructure. And on top of this, you have problem of insecurity. Look at the damage that insecurity has done to agriculture. Look at the damage it has done to the entire economy. Because a lot of resources have to be diverted to be fighting this insurgency and crime. So we need to situate, I'm not a spokesperson of government, but we need to situate this within the context of what's happening.
All right.
That is the point. I mean, there's a lot to do. We can do more in agriculture, we can do more in manufacturing, but we should know what exactly the issues are.
Dr. Muda made a point and said that, a lot of these factors are not the purview of the federal government. And then he talked about structural reforms. And I was just going to respond to that, sir. So let's pick ports, for example. Okay, let's pick ports, let's pick electricity, which are major structural drivers of industrialization and manufacturing. Let's pick ports, electricity, and steel briefly. Most of 80% of port operations in Nigeria is focused in Lagos. As today, as we speak, right, the Minister of Transport, they are currently doing studies for Badagry deep sea ports. AP Mola is going to be terminal operator for Badagry because Badagry has a channel draft of about 16 to 18 meters that Apapa and Tinkan does not have. You know, it has a shore to sea of about 14 to 16 kilometers. It's the shortest distance to the sea in the entire Lagos coastline. Lekki Deep Sea Port is a partnership between the federal government and the private sector, a Chinese company and Indonesian company, and then the federal government. And then, if you look at the Eastern Maritime Corridor, like the Niger Delta, you see nothing. Calabar Deep Sea Port is not operational. One is focused on oil and gas. Bonny is focused on NLNG. Warri has an issue because a lot of oil and gas pipes for crude oil, for gas from escravos makes it difficult for you to dredge the channel draft. Bakassi Deep Sea Port in Cross River is 5 years out at the least. The government is not saying anything about supporting the development of Ibom Deep Sea Port, which should have been a game changer. The government is not talking about the priority river roads that will lead in from the Eastern Maritime Corridor into 28 states that are not bordered by the sea in Nigeria. Let's talk about power. Gas prices are a major problem because 19 of about 26 plants are powered by gas in Nigeria. Thermal plants are powered by gas. Under the domestic gas delivery obligations, you have a situation where the prices that the gas aggregators are getting does not give them the incentive to be able to invest in infrastructure, in trapping, treating, separating, and piping that gas to gas-based industries. Okay, let's talk about steel. The Minister of Steel is so focused on Ajaokuta. I don't know if it's because he's from Kogi State or he really thinks that there's something there, but I don't think there's anything there because the decision to even locate a steel plant in Kogi State was an error in the first place because you locate steel plants by the sea, by the water. Nigeria doesn't actually have high-grade iron ore that you can beneficiate into steel. The iron ore in Nigeria is below 50%. And the government does not want to accept that, look, you need to privatize and send this thing to the private sector to deal. Allow them to bring in high-grade iron ore from the West African coast to be able to beneficiate into steel. These are three major structural drivers of industrialization and manufacturing in Nigeria. Is that not the purview of the federal government?
Let me take on the matter of electricity, power, reforms in that sector. And that's the question I want to put to Professor Mutaka in Zaria. And say, when you look at the reforms in the power sector, how would you assess the keying of the sub-nationals into that? Professor Mutaka, are you there? All right, while we sort that out, we also have a number of reports. Let's get to see this one from Akure.
Show that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's renewed hope agenda has continued to shape Nigeria's economic direction in various facets across states of the Federation. Among the agenda focus is the agricultural sector in Ondo State, which is identified as a major driver of growth, food security, and job creation, which has made significant impact in the outgoing year 2025. The impact of the renewed hope agenda in the state have been evident as farmers benefited from federal input distribution such as herbicides, farm tools, and irrigation equipment, particularly for staple crops. Ondo State government also aligned with the federal agenda through land development, mechanization, and promotion of agribusiness and youth participation.
We in Ondo State too, we have made sure we plug into the Renew Hope agenda of Mr. President, and through all the development interventions that we get, we have been able to be training our youths and women in cassava production, poultry, farming, and some other farming activities, fishery and the rest.
Agriculture remains a key pillar of Ondo State economy, with crops like cocoa, cassava, rice, oil palm, and fisheries supporting employment and income. Investigations also show that Tinubu's renewed hope agenda in agricultural interventions have also helped reduce production costs and increase output, although with some challenges.
The area of tractorization. We don't have equipment for tilling our ground. We don't have where we can store our grains. Security of food tomorrow may be very mean.
Experts say looking ahead to 2026, the prospects for agriculture in the state and Nigeria depend on policy continuity, expansion of agribusiness, among other strategic implementation.
Government has to ensure that policy, the right policy is put in place, the addition of rural roads, like provision of amenity in the rural community.
Experts also say expanding agribusiness and value addition will be critical to unlocking the full potential of agriculture and ensuring long-term economic growth.
All right, this next report is from Birnin Kabi.
State remains a major contributor to Nigeria's agricultural sector, particularly in rice production, supporting national food security. With fertile soil, favorable climate, and access to water from the Niger River Basin, the state supports large-scale farming throughout the year. Under the Renewed Hope agenda, the Kebbi State government has intensified support for farmers through targeted interventions to boost productivity and reduce cost.
Rainy season, if you can compare the two, at times the dry season we get more yield than the rainy season.
When you concentrate on solar system, you will get a bumper harvest far better than the way it used to be.
Key among them is the Kaurangondu Agricultural Development and Growth Initiative, which provides farmers with farm input free of charge.
We have distributed over 30,000 solar-powered pumps. We have distributed 10,000 petrol pumps. We have distributed 10,000 CNG pumps. All this is targeted at reducing the cost of energy or the cost of irrigation so that our farmers will continue to produce.
Federal programs including Agri-Cell projects are supporting climate-smart agriculture, sustainable land management, and environmental restoration.
We have equally come up with a climate-smart agriculture profile of the state. The essence is to look at or to inform our farmers on the vagaries of climate change so that they will be able to adapt and become resilient to the challenges of climate change.
The introduction of fortified rice and plan for special agro-industrial processing zones are expected to strengthen food security, attract investment, and create jobs. These efforts have resulted in increased production and bumper harvest, reinforcing Kebbi State's position as one of the Nigerian leading agricultural hubs. As the state looks toward 2026, agriculture remains central to economic growth and the success of the Renewed Hope agenda.
All right, coming from those two reports, let's wonder if Professor Muntaka is back with us via Zoom from Zaria. Let's confirm that and find out if, yes. Okay, Prof, are you there? Okay, all right. Okay, while we're still trying to fix that, let me bring the question back to the studio here. Okay, All right, Prof, if you're there, you know, before we took those two reports, Professor Mutaka, before we took those two reports...
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. I was saying that I wanted you to assess how the subnationals have keyed into the reforms, particularly in the power sector.
Yes, like I was saying, that the real sector did not perform very well, except for agriculture and manufacturing. Even within the reform itself, for instance, this segregative tariff, ban A, ban B, ban C, also affected the manufacturing sector. So there is no way you produce when you have a high cost of productions. Also on subnationals, the subnational, there is only in terms of the state level. The local governments are excluded because the governors don't release money to them and they don't allow them to function properly as it's supposed to be. So based on that, in terms of the power reforms, that they can establish their power generation state, to the extent that anywhere in the world, major functions of public utilities are the backbone of productions, and therefore production can only be done in the process where there is a stable power and energy, as it were. So the state can be involved in that, but to what extent? Because their own understandings of governance is beyond the delivery, the social service to the people. So the most essential thing, and when you look at the financial sector, yes, people are saying financial sector is stable. Stable in what sense? They are declaring profit while the industries are collapsing in our face. So it is to understand what happened in that. Is it the reforms that making them not to lend to the real sector rather than short-term credits? So these are some of the issues that you look at. And also in terms of ranking, it's not formal to say that it's okay, the reform is working because the inflation is coming down. Anywhere inflation beyond 4% is a crisis period. We are almost on the 12-14%. So there is the need more work to be done to understand the economy itself. What are we doing right so that we can emphasize on that? And for instance, you know that the cost of transport is directly correlated with the issue of the supply of energy. So at the moment you affect the transport sector, all other sectors will be affected with that. So in a more realistic way is to say that even if the subnational are really doing what they are supposed to do, the reforms we cannot say is yet uhuru. But still, there are a lot of things to understand. One, there is no much coordination between the fiscal side and the monetary side. So unless you deepen that coordination, no matter what reforms you are trying to make, it will not hold water. For instance, if you take the tightening situations of the central bank, is the physical side tightening? They are not. They are expanding because one of the major of these reforms that you understand whether those reforms are functions or not. You take the annual budget. What is the performance of the annual budget? For 2025, there was no capital expenditure on those. It's about 13%. How do you then measure the performance of your reforms? One, the basic instrument of budgeting is not working perfectly. We operate 3 budgets in one cycle, and now we are going to roll over both the 2024, 2025 up to march. So you start within that pedestal to understand that, yes, the reforms are not really in terms of giving the real value for this reform. And when you want to examine this, you find the level of poverty in the economy from both the data of government and data of the World Bank, the creditors, are saying the poverty level is expanding. So how reforms works with expanding poverty? These are the critical question to ask ourselves. If those reforms are working, then the level of poverty should drop. The living standard should improve. And therefore, how living standard can improve is by generating employment, generating income for individual families so that's to run their economy. So basically, yes, the reform have started, but the measurement of the reform has negative consequences within the economy. And therefore, the growth you project, about 3 to 4% growth, how does this growth translate in reducing poverty, in reducing hardship for Nigerians? And that's the basic for economic questions that we normally ask in terms of measuring performance of any economic policy. And by the way, economic policy are not cast on stones. That's why you review them and said A and B is working, B and C are not working. So you recalibrate and indeed try to achieve what you wanted to achieve within the shorter time.
All right, thank you. Speaking of the budget and the cycle, of course, the president did say that by March, all of this would be laid to rest, where you wouldn't have to now carry 3, as the case may be in the very first quarter of 2026. You might be dealing with 4 at the same time, but all of this is being taken care of from what the president said. So we have seen some of these sectors and agree that they need to, there's a need to do more work on them.
The budget is chaotic, actually. You know, I think the budget and national plan, they owe a profuse apology to the president for leading us into all of this. And of course, to some extent, to the National Assembly, because National Assembly doesn't create a budget. They just oversight that and then open it up for discussion. But it originated somewhere. And this is being conducted without regard to the fiscal law. There is a fiscal law that governs all the things that happen in budget. And let me tell you this thing has come to a point now where people are asking questions about competencies and politicization of the budgeting process. At Cebu, we are talking about new medium term 26 to 30. I haven't seen the report of the 21 to 25 before you begin to look at the new one. And I was a chair of 3 of the technical committee. I chaired science and technology and innovation, digital economy and bioeconomy. I haven't even seen where we are beginning to have a discussion. And then something was saying that by December you have but I haven't seen anything. So, my brother, it is an exercise in recklessness. Because you remember in your program here, many times I said, there are guidelines. When you do fiscal strategy paper, there's fiscal benchmarks are based on some science. You have American Energy Information Agency that gives you like 3-year projection. And the projections there was $65 to $68. And you are coming with a benchmark of $75. That doesn't connect to any reality. Because normally you go below the projection so that you can have a headroom. That headroom allows accretion to excess crude account and then accretion to reserves. From there you fight your currency. They wipe that out. But by the way, why are you leaving that why are you doing that 10%? Who are you leaving it for? Then on the budget on the crude production, you went for 2 million barrels when actually you were doing 1.4. So when you multiply 2 million by 75, is an accident waiting to happen. And we said it time and time, but the operators don't listen. I mean, in your program here, you've seen when I talk to Ministry of Internal Affairs. The minister does something the following morning. You talk about education man comes. You talk about health, he's delivering, agriculture is delivering. That's not what we are seeing. That's not what we're seeing, because all the elements of that law are being violated. 4 months before you budget day, you haven't started. Budget performance, you see every quarter, you haven't seen it. And where will I start?
I was even going to say that the Ministry of Finance does not have a cash flow waterfall model that it uses to scientifically project the price of crude oil and what revenues is accruable to the federal government of Nigeria based on the price of crude oil. Crude oil price is Brent, that is used to measure the 34 blends of crude that is produced in Nigeria, is actually hovering around $59 to $60 a barrel. And there are indications that if Russia comes back officially to the market, if a deal is struck with Russia, and Russia is brought back officially to the market, for example, the supply is going to lead to prices coming down to anywhere around $48 to $50 a barrel. That is already below Nigeria's cumulative unit cost production per barrel. Yeah. So what's going to be the fate of the budget? National Assembly is saying they are putting...
EIA says for first quarter, 58, 54, 54, 56. That's what it is going to be, dollars. That's what it's going to be. And they're now posting 64.85.
As the
when
benchmark.
It is going at when it is already down,
which is not realistic.
58,
it's
54.
not scientific.
All right. So what has happened now is nothing compared to what will happen in 12 months' time.
2 million barrels per day is not realistic. And I say this because Nigeria is one of maybe 2 countries or 3 countries in the world producing crude oil and trapping gas daily that does not have an automated hydrocarbon accounting structure.
Okay. At this point, we'll take a short break. When we return, we'll go to those areas where significant achievements have been made. Earlier on, Professor Kenny talked about fintech. We'll look at those areas. We'll also open the phone line so we can get in your phone calls. And we also have a number of reports in the can, which we'll bring to you. So stay with us. We'll be right back after this short break. Thanks for staying with us. On this segment, the phone lines will be open. You can join in the conversation in the studio. As we say every Tuesday, if you're calling in and your call gets through, turn down the volume of your TV set to avoid the hurlback or the echo. And we also encourage you to go straight to the point, keep it short, so others can also get on the platform. And we always say one way of knowing your call is through to the studio is you see your name appear on the screen. It tells you that the call has been passed through. And just go ahead and ask your question or make a comment. And we ask that you not bother too much about the greetings. A simple hello would suffice. So we'll start off this segment with another in our reports. This one is from Enugu.
Nigeria agricultural sector demonstrated steady growth in the output of staple crops, according to the 2025 Agricultural Performance Survey conducted by National Agricultural Extension and Research Liaison Services. The survey showed increased production of main crops such as maize, sorghum, millet, yam, and cassava compared to 2024. This expansion contributed to a reduction in food prices across the 6 geopolitical zones, with significant declines in staple crops, indicating availability in the local markets.
Other items have dropped. We are very happy. But red oil, actually, we don't know the reason why it has refused to drop.
Prices of things really came down, not quite down, but at least there is a lot of differences from the last market I attended and today.
Agriculture has continued to be one of Nigeria's most important contributors to the economic growth in 2025. This performance reflects a notable contribution to gross domestic product, GDP, and a strengthening role for agriculture in the broader economy. However, the 2025 budget by the federal government marked a significant increase in funding for the Ministry of Agriculture to support food production, mechanization, and value chain development.
Value addition is very wonderful. So because the federal government has support, and then brought in some of these programs, that will help complement the effort of the federal government. That is why farmers are getting this even rosy.
Based on the current trend, residents in Enugu believe that the agriculture sector in 2026 is expected to build on the gains of 2025 with continued expansion in staple crop production and greater focus on value chain development. In Enugu State, the present government, through farm estates and other policies from agricultural agencies, are partners in pushing for stronger planning systems, including conducting dry season survey to monitor year-round production. As 2025 winds down, experts in the sector say the agricultural system is poised for continued progress in 2026 as security measures are aligned to support resilient food bounty in the country.
From Enugu, we go to Kano for this next report.
Orumi community, Makoda local government area of Kano State, is known for year-round farming. Recently, however, farming activities suffered a major setback following the blockage of an irrigation canal that conveys water from the Gari Dam, leading to significant losses for many farmers.
I spent more than 2 million last year. I was able to realize only 150,000. My farm was washed away by floods.
In response, the federal government initiated a reclamation intervention to address the challenge. The canal has now been cleared of weeds, restoring water flow and enabling farmers to return to their fields.
I am overwhelmed. I was so happy.
To further advance the food security objectives of the renewed hope agenda, arrangements have been concluded for the resumption of work on the abandoned Malikawa Dam and its irrigation scheme.
That we can have enough food to feed our people and also export whatever is in excess.
Meanwhile, through its agro-pastoral development project, Kano State government is set to commence construction of a 3.1 billion litre capacity earth dam and irrigation infrastructure in the Dansushia forest. This is in addition to the introduction of modern farming techniques and the provision of farm implements to boost agricultural production and generate employment opportunities. These interventions are expected to enhance productivity and accelerate economic growth through agriculture.
All right, this time let's go down south and bring you this report from Benin.
The federal government, through the Renewed Hope agenda, has rolled out policy reforms, programs, and initiatives to empower, create jobs, and to encourage women and youth's participation in agriculture and agribusiness this year. These include capacity building trainings, disbursement of farm inputs and credit facilities to farmers aimed at diversifying the economy and enhancing value chains of the nation's agricultural produce.
Pesticides were given to farmers to help reduce the effects of pests in their farms. So we've been able to curb that in the states. Then we have liquid fertilizers, the normal NPK and the other liquid fertilizers also given to farmers too, to help them increase their production yield. We also have tillers. Tillers were given out.
The state government, under the leadership of Senator Boyle, has provided tractors for farm mechanization in Edo State, over 30. As I speak with you now, they are working in different areas or different senatorial districts of the state.
For farmers in the state, it has been a year of surplus as the various supports they received from the federal government led to increased food production in 2025.
I farmed corn 4 times this year. As I told you, I'm still eating corn in December. That's the last one that I've done now. I'm still eating it in December right now. That's to tell you that I have a bumper of harvest.
What we have sown in this year, we have benefit from the federal government, a huge productive. we have a seed that we save to help our Nigeria.
As they look forward to 2026, stakeholders believe that provision of storage facilities, guaranteed market access, and promotion of climate-resilient practices will help to boost the sector's contributions to the nation's economy. In Benin.
All right, so back here in the studio, let's now look at some of the information that have come through in some of those reports. They've been high on agriculture, and let's go to Lagos and link up with Dr. Muda Yusuf. They've been high on agriculture, but we also recall that Professor Ken Ife spoke about fintech, and it was in an earlier comment, I believe, Dr. Muda himself talked about unemployment. And again, when we come to that, we should look at how small and medium enterprises have thrived in 2025, given the policies and the reforms that have come in. Dr. Muda Yusuf.
Yes, just as you said, some progress has been made in agriculture. A lot more needs to be done, especially around insecurity. I think we need to emphasize that. And I'm also aware that the farmers, particularly rice farmers, are currently complaining about the fact that the price of rice has collapsed. And they are not happy about it. These are some of the challenges of economic management. The citizens are happy that prices are dropping. They are celebrating, but the farmers are not happy that the prices are dropping. So we need to address that so that it also don't create a situation where the farmers walk away from the farm or walk away from some crops if they feel that it's not profitable to continue to plant those crops. And that's why I think that going forward, perhaps we should be looking at this concept of minimum guaranteed price for farmers. I mean, this is a concept that is used globally, at least to give confidence to farmers that we are not going to lose money in the event of a glut of production. So the policy of minimum guaranteed price is very essential. On the issue of small businesses, some of the biggest casualties of the reform are actually the small businesses because they did not have the capacity to absorb shocks. So many of them actually went under at the peak of the challenges of the reform. But luckily, happily, I mean, many of them are, returning. They are restoring their businesses. They have adjusted. Some of them needed to adjust business model. But the most important issue around small businesses are the structural factors. We cannot overemphasize that.
All right.
That the cost of transportation, the cost of power, even challenges of insecurity, issues of procurement and so on and so forth.
Right.
And issues of financing, that is also key.
Okay.
So for small businesses, we need to address those critical structural factors. And I must emphasize again that the structural factors in this economy is the responsibility of both the federal, the states, and the local governments. I think that for me is extremely very, very critical.
All right.
Those are the things that I would say around the SMEs.
Okay. Let's quickly go to the phone lines. We have a Tanimu who's calling in from Jalingo. Tanimu, if you're still there, go ahead. Tanimu. All right. We lost that call. I'd like to keep those calls coming through and see how we can take them up from there. Yes, Prof, if we come back here to the studio here in Abuja, the matter of small and medium enterprises and how they fared. Of course, as Dr. Muda Yusuf has said, a lot of structural challenges have affected the performance of the SMEs. But that, albeit, They're finding their way back now.
But it's very tough. And this still comes back to some other things. We talked about some of this because at the outset, the central bank said they're not going to do much at the moment about domestic finance intervention. And it's understandable because of what they met on the ground. So that means that some of those cushion or other things we are coming there, they're not going to be there for now. Then we also have the issue about the high interest rate and the repercussions on borrowing for this category of that sector of our economy. Then the president, in his speech, said three things. He said, no more subsidy. He wants to liberalize the forex, but then he says consumer credit. So I took that consumer credit and then I developed papers on that and said, that is one thing you can apply to cushion the effect of those two things I've just mentioned. Yeah. Targeted at the MSMEs, because those who are manufacturing, because we are a cash economy, 100% cash for buy anything, buy a car, buy that. If we can channel that consumer credit to those manufacturing,
but then
we can buy. No. You put 10% down or 20%.
Who is going to pay the difference?
No, that's where the credit drops. It drops to the demand. I gave an example.
Okay,
this is a way to get them back into.
If you might just pause a while, we have the scholar from Delta. I'm not quite sure about the name, but if you're on there, can you just introduce yourself quickly and then you're on. The caller from Delta.
So it's targeted credit facility.
Hello.
Okay.
Yes.
My name is Kromaga.
Okay.
I'm calling from Delta State.
All right. Go ahead.
Yeah. First, I think I have to congratulate you people that this is the first time that NTA is actually behaving neutral by bringing somebody like Mr. Kelvin. Normally, I don't usually watch NTA except Tuesday Live, but today you guys were neutral. Now, my question is, the reforms and the agriculture you people are talking about, I don't see how it's affecting us in Delta State here. The seedlings and the fertilizer, it doesn't get to the local farmers at all. Two, the reforms from the federal government, I don't see how it's impacting on the living standard of common Nigerians. As I'm talking to you, for almost a year now, my car got knocked engine and I've not been able to repair it because of the cost of spare parts, which skyrocketed after Tinubu entered power. So I don't see what the game the government is usually talking about, because it's not reflecting on the living standard of common Nigerians. So whatever the government is saying, they are all lies. And Mr. Kelvin, I'm very, very happy that NTA can bring somebody like you, because they usually don't bring people like you that say the truth. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so very much, Kromaga from Delta. Well, those are your views, which you're entitled to. I'm not sure everyone would agree with you on that factor. Yes, things may be that tough. But again, I would also like to remind you that here on the NTA, our primary concern is not the usual bashing. We lay things out professionally, and thank you for admitting that much. Thank you so much. But thank you for your comments as well. Our analysts will respond appropriately. We have another call. Professor Khalifa Dikwa calling in from Kaduna. Yes, go ahead, Prof.
Professor Kaduna, yes. Hello, good evening, everyone.
Yes, good evening, Prof.
My question to the experts in the House, Professor Sanife, Kelvin, Professor Muntaka, and Dr. Mudashir Yusuf. Let me ask a naive question. what is the heck is going to happen if we insist that the National Assembly insists that the borrowing rate will be a single digit for manufacturers and small and medium entrepreneurs? That is my main question. And secondly, I would like us to say that Nigeria has alternative. In the past, during IDB, there was no alternative to IMF and World Bank. Today we have alternative. Even at that time, everybody used to do their own and do the Nigeria's own. And therefore, the double digit is no longer good. That is the one. And that I dare say that it should remain non-aligned. And agriculture is the main driver. That unless you want me to go back and read economics again, and we have a vice president who is a first class agri-economist. So I don't know why we insist on foreign advice. The whose advice has never worked anywhere in Africa. None. Why should we go into something into empirical method of trial and error, asking Nigerians to wait a little bit to the patient? We are not benefit. We have alternatives. We will see where it works, but not in Africa, and Nigeria in particular, which is being trailed for long in order to leave it, in order not to allow it to move the remaining African countries into prosperity. Thank you very much.
You have to repeat the question.
All right. Okay. Well, both Prof. Kedife and the other discussants will try to make out exactly the meat of your question. But again, we've had a number of calls and some views. Let me go to Professor Muttaka and couch it this way, particularly from the comments of Kromaga from Delta. Would it be correct to say everything that has been said, all that's been said are lies and no progress has taken place? Would that be a fair comment?
Didn't get his question. I didn't quite get his question. You'll have to tell us the questions he asked. I didn't quite hear him.
I said you can't say all what has been said is lies, but the most essential thing is one of all to say, like I said, there are some areas where progress has been made, and there are areas that you can't, no matter how you want to vent it, it can be said progress has been made. But by the way, I have not heard what the question said. It is recurring in this program that whenever a phone call, you can hear them, and in most cases, you can't even connect. So I think you should also do your housekeeping very well as well. But the fact is that there are some of the reforms that really change things and things are improving. But there are some that are not making. For instance, when we said the most essential important things about economic reforms is to improve life, to improve standard of living. Is it fair to say to Nigerians that their living standards have improved? Or we said the level of poverty decrease or increase. So those are the things. But when you look at certain basis, for instance, improvement in the collections of revenue, and because that improvement is visibly, you can see that how the revenue is used is another matter altogether. So it is that there is no also coordination between the federal government and subnationals. Subnationals are supposed to be coordinated in terms of economic policy, but because economic policy is exclusive list of federal government. So, but there are avenues at which you can coordinate those with the subnational. National Planning Commission, National Planning Board is there for Coordination and National Economic Council are meant to coordinate sub-nationals and indeed. And the problem is that in most cases, in most time, we don't follow what the Nigerian Constitution said. The Nigerian Constitution, the premise said, objective principles of Chapter 2 is that the economy should be run in such a way that is equitable to everyone. So unless you reduce the gap between the rich and the poor, then you are not following the economic postulate, the constitutional postulates of the country. So it is important to say that there are some progress that have been made. And indeed, for instance, if you state all the performance of certain MDAs, the procurement of international passport, there are improvements there. There are other ministries that there is improvements in terms of what you do with public funds. Also, to some extent, you said the NEL fund, they introduced it, though we have doubt on its achievement because to what extent, how many you give access to. Okay. So these are kind of things that you can say, yes, it's true. But in terms of agriculture as well, there are certain improvements in terms of distributions of fertilizer. But the price of fertilizer is making it very expensive to produce. And by the time they produce to the market, the price has collapsed. And therefore, it makes the farmers to be hesitant in going back to production. So in a more comprehensive manner, there are improvements, there are failures, there are things like what I said about budget performance. You can't say there is improvement in the last 2 years in terms of budget performance, because from the data we have, you have some negatives in that areas. So I think we can't say what said is lie, but there are some areas that you have to give it credit to the government, as well as there are areas we will call them to improve if they want the reforms to perform.
All right, just before you come in, let's get this caller who's been on the line for a while. Sani Phillips calling in from Abuja. Hello. Sani, go ahead. Yes, Sani, if you're there, calling in from Abuja.
A very good evening to you, Mr.
Yes, good evening. All right.
I listened to the man who called from Delta, and I was a little bit worried in terms of his perceptions, and this is what brings me to this question. It seems to me like Nigerians do not understand that we operate a constitutional democracy, and we are not giving, we are not emphasizing on our local economies. No government in the history of Nigeria has given funds to state governments. Today, our state governments are richer than they were maybe 4 years ago. But Nigerians are not asking or holding accountable their leaders at the state level. Because it is to me an aggregate of the local economy. If the economies in the states are doing well, it will culminate into something much more better for the country. So instead of always talking about the federal government, nothing is working, this is not working, how have we held our our governors accountable and our local economies in managing our local economies? I don't know if there's a gap. I don't know if the professor can help us. How can we hold our state governors accountable for the successes or the failures of our local economies?
All right. Thank you very much, Sani Phillips. Yes.
The state governments don't control monetary policy. Okay. The state governments cannot manage inflation and interest rates. That's the exclusive preserve of the federal government. If you look at the legislative list, exclusive, concurrent, and residual list. And then I was going to come back to what Professor Mutaka from Zaria said about fertilizer prices.
Right.
And if you look at fertilizer, there are three components. There's ammonium nitrate gas, which is mostly from methane gas. There is muriate of potash, and then there is phosphates. Nigeria has ammonium nitrate gas. It doesn't have muriate of potash. It doesn't have phosphates. And if you look at the chart, you see that the prices of phosphates that were imported from Morocco and the prices of muriate of potash went up after Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022. And prices of fertilizer just kept going up because prices of fertilizer are very consequential to the prices of food, right? And then, you know, we're talking about the per capita income, purchasing power parity. We're talking about the living standard of Nigerians and now how that has diminished as you've collapsed the exchange rates and brought it to one window where the central bank does not need to intervene, the market provides some liquidity, right? And then we're asking ourselves, if you look at inflation, interest rate, and exchange rate, what is the most driver of imports in Nigeria that takes the most effects out of Nigeria? Energy and food. Within the last 30 days, right, the government, led by the regulator that was just sacked, allowed importation of 1.8 billion liters of petrol. Dangote is able to solve Nigeria's petrol demand on a daily basis. Right? He doesn't get enough crude oil feedstock that he needs. Dangote has to import about 10 to 12 million barrels of crude on a monthly basis. He doesn't get enough gas feedstock that he needs to actually produce urea. He gets about 60-70% because ELPS2, that the pipeline from Escra was supplying him gas feedstock to Lagos, is not able to supply him all the gas that he needs. These are the structural factors that you have to pay attention to because in my view, I think the CBN is stretched in terms of monetary policy. The asymmetric corridor and liquidity ratio and MPR, they are stretched. There is not much the CBN can do from here to manage inflation, right? Have they done a good job? Yes, but can the fiscal authorities take over the structural reforms that are required to actually stabilize this trilemma of inflation, interest rates, and exchange rate as it leads to, you know, the cost of living and affects Nigerians on a real-time basis?
Let's get to the phones. We'll return to that. Abdul calling from Abuja. Abdul, go ahead if you're with us. Abdul?
Thank you. My name is Abdul from Abuja.
Yes.
The policy of government, it doesn't help matters. Millions of Nigeria are going into massive poverty. How can the government be able to curtail this problem? Because if they didn't, next year is going to be very worse with the policy of the government of tax reform that they want to use and implement the budget of 2026. The reality is that we agree of Nigeria, they have to ask their state governors and their local government, but the present administration are in the wrong position. I'm very glad to hear your own visitor in the middle. I've already break it down, and I agree with whatever your guests are saying. They have to wake up and think out of the box before it's too.
All right, Abdul, thank you so much. Well, Prof, many issues now on the ground from
the questions raised
yes.
by Kevin.
By Kevin.
Kevin, yeah.
And something I wouldn't like us to lose sight of. It's something that Dr. Muda Yusuf said with particular reference to rice and rice farmers.
Yeah.
The price
stabilization of some sort.
It's come down, but the farmers are not happy.
Minimum price guarantee.
All right, yes.
Well, I'm a victim because I was selling Gary. I produced in my factory 60,000 naira last year. Now I'm selling 20,000 naira. Then I have 1,500 hectares of cassava right now. Okay, now let's attempt your question. You see, you're looking at the connection between inflation, interest rate, and exchange rate, and how would you get that to touch the man on the street? To be honest with you, this is the same question that we raise when we are saying we are posting growth of 4.2%, but the quality of that growth is questionable because it doesn't impact on employment, it doesn't reduce poverty, it doesn't hit the ground. So where is food in this? Where are the basic needs in this? And where are the import dependency in this? Because that destroys productive capacity that creates employment. And if you look at the sector generating the growth, oil sector did 20% 2 quarters ago, 5% last quarter. Okay, that was oil. But then non-oil area, especially services, are driving the growth. But the question is, the growth in the ICT, the growth in the banking sector, for insurance, even 20-something%. Does that give me food? Is it the insurance that will give me food? Is it the currency, crypto, or that? Or the music? Is that going to give me food? Because in the end of the day, what is it that actually hits and adds value to the raw materials you have that creates that employment, that feeds you? And that's where the poor man is connected. So when we talk about our numbers, they still don't still move things in their respect. But the second one that you are pushing, and Muda is right. Muda is right because the price stability is, in our project we were saying, okay, we guarantee 100% offtake from all our farmers, and I'm afraid I had to give them the price that I promised them last year to be able to take all their crops, because I know if I don't take them off them and go and process and take all the losses, they won't grow cassava next year for me. So I have to maintain that. How would you enlarge this? There is insurance, but insurance deals with the fallout of flood or whatever.
Okay, but this is what
market. Reasons. What do you call it again?
What the consumer,
marketing board or something like that.
The ordinary citizen requires is lower prices. Now, balancing that against what the producer,
the government creating like a minimum price guarantee, like Dr. Muda suggested, and creating a backstop to ensure that if there is a sudden price shock, it doesn't take the producers and farmers into losses, is where the actual programs, subsidies, agricultural subsidies should actually come into.
Yeah.
That's where it should come into. Those are the targeted subsidies that you need in the agricultural sector to be able to give confidence to producers to invest money into production, real-time production.
And America does that very well, because although food is not on the development agenda of America, it's actually in the diplomacy. So that's why they could say non-supply food to this country, and then they pour it into the sea and pay the farmers off. And they will subsidize. And during our EPA arrangements, Europe refused to bring food subsidy on the table. They will not, because the next thing is that all the French farmers will block all the streets. They subsidize food, but they don't want us to. Rather, they want us to subsidize consumption, when you should be subsidizing production.
Okay, back to the phones. Christian is calling in from Abuja. Hello.
Good evening.
Yes, go right ahead.
Cyril.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm Prof. And then I didn't quite get the name of the young man there that is actually giving us the rating. Not that the profs and the other people are not giving us the rating, but he's been hard on the truth. My major concern is where they're coming to now, which is how does the improvements, especially in agriculture, affect the common man on the street? What I mean by that is, please let us change the narrative in advising the agri-ministry, the agri-gurus, those who are holding the posts in the areas that are safe of improving, to please bring it down, let it hit the ground. Like Professor K is saying, you are Prof, this is Mr. Anuwake from NCC, you know. Let them hit the ground, let them hit the common man, let the effects be felt. And then in those areas that we are saying that are not improving, what are the nitty-gritty, what are the, let's bring it down to the common man's language. What are those critical things, critical factors, critical inputs, critical economic indices that can be brought in to begin to improve them? Like spending, like they say something about the gaps between the international standards in the price of oil, forecast, and in the production of the crude oil. Please, can we begin to tell those who are in charge in the Ministry of Petroleum and in other people, in other such ministries, and I mean GATS, let them begin to put their various estimates in very critical, essential, objective factors. Why do we say we are going to produce 2 million barrels a day when we are sure we cannot even make up to 1.5 million barrels a day? And that means we are underproducing by 500,000 barrels, and when you multiply that into 31 days or 30 days in a month, you know what it means. So please let us begin to talk to those who are in charge directly. Tell them what they can do to improve where improvements are not being felt, and where they are being felt, how do they affect the common man directly? How does it be felt in the streets? How does it go down? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christian. All right, so at this point, let's bring in Dr. Muda Yusuf once again in the matter of SMEs, the prices of goods. From what Christian is saying and from what a number of callers have said, I have this challenge in determining how it should go. We want the prices lower. We want to pay less for those goods. In fact, there are those who would say, let's go back to how, the cost of goods some 10, 15 years ago. But again, what does that speak of the producers? And how can this balance out? Dr. Muda Yusuf started talking about it, and we've had one or two other opinions here. How do you determine that you bring the prices down and everyone is still happy?
Well, it has to do with government intervention. Because even if you are running a market economy, there's always a window for government intervention. And that is why in economics we talk about market failures. And the whole idea of market failure is that the market cannot fix everything. So whatever the market cannot fix, the government has to fix it. That is the whole idea of market failure. Now, in this particular instance, I think in the conversation that you have had, there was this discussion about the cost of fertilizer. What are we doing to bring down the cost of fertilizer? That requires some specific targeted intervention. What are we doing about the cost of financing? You cannot expect people who are in manufacturing or who are in agriculture to be going to the open financial market to source funds. It cannot fly. So there has to be subsidized credit. The same is true about investment in things like irrigation facility, improved seedlings, tractors, harvesters, all the equipment that you need. There must be deliberate policy of government to crash the cost of production. That is one way in which you can have a win-win. Because if their cost is lower and the prices are not so high, they will still have very good margin. The challenge we are dealing with is that the costs are high, prices are dropping, their margins are shrinking. That is why they are not having, and nobody is compensating them for that. So from the cost of production or from the production perspective, we need to be very deliberate to bring down the cost of production, whether it is in agriculture, whether it is in manufacturing, whether it is in health, whether it's in education. Because these are basic sectors that impact on the lives of the people. So deliberate intervention, I think, is the way to go.
All right.
We can now complement that with the principle of guaranteed minimum price. Mm-hmm. That if you have done all of this and yet prices are crashing, you can offer to offtake. Just as Prof said he did in his individual capacity. You offer to offtake, that will give farmers the confidence that worst case scenario, I'm going to get so much. For me, I think that is the way to go about it. And we need to deploy all our policy instruments to ensure this intervention. Can be direct intervention, can be intervention through monetary policy, can be intervention through tax policy, can be intervention through even tariff policy. These are specific measures of intervention that we need to do to support production so that profitability in investing in production can be elevated. That will be able to keep more people in production rather than everybody going to buy bonds or buy treasury bills. We don't add much value to the economy.
Oh, well.
See, American government. I wanted to say something.
You're laughing at that, but there are those who would also argue that, yes, the bonds would be another way of making it.
Yeah, it helps to finance government.
Right.
But it doesn't add to real sector growth.
Right. Okay. But somewhere along the line, it also has its values.
Right.
Certainly. See, China stopped the importation of millions of tons of American soya beans. So all the farmers screamed. And now they are paying out billions of dollars to them because China has stopped importing their soya beans. That is an intervention. And that's a subsidy to the production level of production, not on consumption.
Okay.
And if you remember in 1984 or 1974, when we started this oil OPEC something, Henry Kissinger, they tried to stop the OPEC. We said we were going to have copper union. They said, oh, these guys are going to come on soya beans, rice, and all that. They now decided to come together, and they said we must subsidize rice, maize, and soya beans. Okay. Those three were being heavily subsidized to make sure that they can secure their own stomach, because they don't know what Africans and these people are going to do next.
Let me tell you how I think we can bring inflation down. Energy is a major contributor to inflation. Nigeria is taking about $28 billion for energy costs on a yearly basis. Petrol alone takes about $12 to $14 billion on a yearly basis. The president can say, I'm giving my cabinet a 5-year target to ensure that Nigeria becomes a net exporter of refined transportation fuels to other countries in Africa and around the world, right? And I'm giving them a 5-year target to ensure that Nigeria stops importing crude oil for refining. Because up until last year, Nigeria was exporting crude. But Dangote came, and because Nigeria could not guarantee him crude feedstock, he's now importing crude from America and other places. And he's spending, this year he imported 100 million barrels, $6.5 billion went out in FX. Your balance of payments affects your GDP, net external reserves, your net asset ratio, right. And that impacts on your exchange rates, right? So if you give a 5-year target and say we're going to become net exporter of urea, net exporter of refined transportation fuels and non-transportation fuels, you have linear alkyl benzene, you have sludge, you have residual fuel oils, you have petroleum coke, and all those non-transportation fuel derivatives. it will impact on your exchange rate, and that will impact on inflation, and the MPC will start revising interest rates back to fair value, right? But the question I have is, given all the machinations happening, is there political will from the State House to ensure that the commercial refiners in Nigeria can get the crude they need in Nigeria, and that you can reduce drastically if the domestic refiner has the capacity to supply the local market, considering how much FX? Because in the last 30 days, $1.6 billion has been spent importing 1.8 billion liters of petrol into Nigeria, which is absurd. Is there political will?
No, but the question is, we have a PIA. They're all in PIA. Is the political will to fully
implement the PIA there?
Finish.
All
That's
right.
what it is.
Let me go over to Professor Muttaka, and I'd like to take a sharp deviate from the trend that's been going on, and this is perhaps the only area we have not spoken about as we've been considering the economy, unemployment and all that, and that has to do with education and the system. Has the Nigerian education system been tailored to produce or to bridge and address the huge skills gap, and what progress has been made in that? Because these are the people who will drive those small enterprises. You're still exporting jobs to neighboring countries for craftsmen. So how well has the education system been tailored to address the skills gap? Professor Muttaka.
Yes, it's a good question, and my response is this. There are 2 tiers or 3 tiers of education system. One, there is those at the university level, polytechnics and colleges of education. These are tailored to serve certain purposes. But when you lump them together and said skills gap, what does that mean? For a university graduate, I'm not training him to become a carpenter. I'm training him to become an intellectual person that can move into any system and find himself and excel. And that's what we have been doing over the years. And when you find our graduates all over the world, they excel because we give him the analytical capacity to be wherever he wants to be, because the rudiment of that training is to develop a human mind that can adopt any situation. For instance, let me give you an example. If you train an economist, for instance, you're not training him for an operational level of banks. But when he comes to the bank, he finds it easy for somebody who has studied religious studies. You find he has to learn the concept. But these ones, they were training them for intellectual research and deep analysis of what is happening.
That is at what level of education? And you did say yourself that there are 3 tiers. So let's take all of it. I said the education system as a whole.
The second tier you are talking about is where you trail the skill and the manpower. But the fact of the matter is that, one, there are days of facilities. In the early 70s and 80s, if you go to any secondary school, you go to their technical workshop, you will find out even our current university will have not that technical workshop. But most of that workshop at the public level, public institutions have collapsed. And the best brain to impact on that skill have led the system, either left the entire education sector to another thing else because of lack of remunerations and motivation. And at the lower level, you find out the best training. From 1970s, 60s, 70s, 80s, what you are required to do at the LEA level is to pass a common entrance. If you pass a common entrance, you will be admitted to an institution where you'll be given all the facilities for you to excel. So there is a problem in terms of education. One, there is underfunding. In the last 20 years, education has not achieved more than 10% of annual budget of this country. So you find out that there is dearth of facilities, dearth of motivated, skilled people that's supposed to impact. So unless you realize what you are supposed to do as government to generate and direct the fundamental principle of allowing education to drive the process, it will not work. So the fact of the matter, yes, there are skill death, but it's not unrelated with what you find in the sector.
All right. And on that note, we'll have to thank you very much, Professor Mohammed Muttaka, joining us from Zaria via Zoom. Thank you for your contribution to this program. We appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Please repair your phone lines. All your programs, you find out your phone lines are not going through. If they go through, nobody hear anything. Please, you are large enough to deal with this issue. Please.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks. Also, let us extend our thanks to Dr. Muda Yusuf, CEO of Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprises. He joined us via Zoom, but from Lagos. Dr. Muda
Thank
Yusuf,
you very much.
We always appreciate your contributions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
Thank you. And back here in the studio, Kevin Emmanuel, economist. Thank you for your incisive analysis, and we appreciate your contributions. Thank you for your thoughts.
Thank you so much for having me.
Right. Yeah. And Professor Ken Ife.
Thank you.
You're always at home here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Such a pleasure.
Right. That's our program today. We thank you for watching. Next week, we'll be back with NTA Tuesday Live. I'm Cyril Stover. Bye for now.